Look at the exhausting, relentless cycle of your daily existence. From the moment you wake up, your mind is consumed by a frantic, deafening noise, desperately begging an external universe to intervene in your personal struggles. You spend your entire life falling to your knees, pleading with a distant deity to fix your failing health, repair your shattered relationships, or rescue you from terrifying financial ruin. Notice the profound tragedy of this deeply ingrained habit. You look at the chaotic circumstances around you and instantly bind your sacred identity to these fleeting, material shadows. You declare with absolute conviction, "I am sick. I am entirely broke." Or, "I am hopelessly depressed." In doing so, you blindly attach the eternal, indestructible essence of your being to temporary terrestrial hallucinations. You have become utterly convinced that you are a fragile, isolated mortal, trapped in a hostile world, waiting for an outside force to magically hand you a miracle. This is the ultimate illusion, keeping you completely spiritually powerless. Pause. Take a slow, deep breath, and let the heavy, suffocating weight of this religious conditioning fall entirely away. There is a revolutionary, mystical truth waiting to shatter the terrifying nightmare of your human separation. The divine is absolutely not a distant judge sitting in the clouds, withholding or granting favors. God is the very consciousness looking out through your eyes right now. Gently step away from the exhausting battlefield of begging and pleading. Enter the silent, untouched sanctuary within, and softly allow yourself to recognize the infinite power that already exists as your very own being. Deep within the heavy architecture of human existence operates a relentless, hypnotic state of awareness that Goldsmith identified as the carnal mind. This terrestrial consciousness is a tragic, exhausting factory of duality, endlessly and aggressively dividing your entire universe into agonizing fragments of good and evil, sickness and health, abundance and devastating lack. It operates entirely on the terrifying premise of separation, whispering that you are a vulnerable, isolated mortal trapped in a fragile physical body, completely dependent on external conditions for your survival, peace, and happiness. This carnal mind forces you to constantly judge every fleeting circumstance through the terrified, limited lens of the physical senses, convincing you that the material world is the undeniable, absolute reality. You are brutalized by the belief that human conditioning, heredity, and external causation dictate your destiny, leaving you in a permanent state of anxiety and fear. Driven by this blind panic and profound sense of separation, you engage in the ultimate, tragic spiritual error. You fall to your knees and pray to an external God, desperately begging the infinite Creator to magically intervene and fix your broken material circumstances. You plead for divine power to heal a diseased body, to miraculously manipulate a failing bank account, or to resolve a shattered relationship. Yet, you must gently and clearly realize why this begging form of traditional prayer completely fails to bring you lasting peace. leaving you spiritually powerless and mentally frustrated when your human timeline is not magically met. The exact moment you ask God to change a physical condition, you are unknowingly practicing spiritual materialism. You are treating the infinite divine like a cosmic vending machine, unconsciously acknowledging separation and actively strengthening the very illusion of lack you desperately wish to escape. You are praying from the deeply flawed premise that something in God's infinite universe is actually broken and urgently needs to be fixed by human standards. The profound, silent, mystical truth is that the divine absolutely does not operate in the chaotic realm of human duality, reward, or punishment. God does not know sickness, and therefore God absolutely does not cure sickness. God does not recognize poverty, and therefore does not manipulate physical currency to pay your earthly bills. True healing is never about desperately fixing what appears broken in the material world. The infinite divine presence simply is, eternally expressing itself as wholeness, completeness, and indestructible perfection. To ask the infinite wholeness to descend into the chaotic illusion of the carnal mind merely to fix a human hallucination is a profound misunderstanding of spiritual law. You must softly step back from this exhausting mental battlefield and clearly recognize the fundamental unreality of these dense material appearances. Everything that appears in your life as terminal disease, financial lack, or severe emotional suffering is nothing more than human misconception, a temporary, hypnotic misperception of spiritual reality. These terrifying conditions that seem to violently suffocate your life are absolutely not you, nor do they possess any actual substance, power, or authority to dictate your internal state of being. They exist entirely in the realm of false mental concepts, completely absent from the flawless reality of spiritual consciousness. They are merely heavy, dark clouds drifting aimlessly across the vast, untouched, and silent sky of your pure spiritual awareness. Just as a violent storm may temporarily obscure the blazing sun without ever diminishing a single ounce of its actual light, the chaotic circumstances of your human experience may momentarily cloud your human perception, but they can never alter, touch, or destroy the perfect spiritual reality of your true identity. You must completely stop fighting these fleeting, terrifying shadows. When you gently release your desperate, the fearful grip on the carnal mind's dualistic illusions, you realize that your essential nature remains completely untouched by temporary appearances. You simply and quietly rest in the profound recognition that material conditions are passing experiences, absolutely unreal as spiritual facts, allowing the heavy nightmare of human struggle to effortlessly dissolve into the gentle light of absolute divine perfection. To move gracefully into the deepest dimensions of this mystical truth, you must undergo the most profound shift a human soul can ever experience, arriving at the staggering revelation of the sacred words, I am. For your entire human existence, you have casually and tragically used these two words to bind the infinite divine to passing terrestrial shadows. You declare, I am sick with an incurable disease. I am facing bankruptcy. Or I am completely depressed. Blindly attaching the eternal, indestructible presence of God to the temporary, hypnotic illusions of the carnal mind. But when the ancient mystics walked the earth, they understood the breathtaking reality behind this sacred identity. When Moses stood before the burning bush in the silent desert, the infinite simply declared, "I am that I am." When Jesus majestically stated, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," it was absolutely not the fragile human carpenter speaking from a place of personal ego. It was the pure Christ consciousness, the infinite divine presence recognizing itself as the very substance of all existence. This I am is absolutely not your personal identity. It is not your disabled physical body, your failing business history, your psychological baggage, or your earthly personality, with all its terrifying flaws and historical conditioning. The true I am is the pure, boundless consciousness silently observing the world through your eyes at this exact fraction of a second. It is the very life force expressing through every single cell of your being. When you gently stop attaching limiting human concepts to your identity and simply rest in the empty, silent awareness of I am, you elegantly release the suffocating burden of personal sense, the terrifying belief that you are an isolated mortal cut off from the infinite. In this breathtaking silence, you discover the gentle, undeniable reality of non-dual being. You realize with profound clarity that there is absolutely no separation between your awareness and the divine. The very consciousness that you are is the exact same consciousness that orchestrates the stars. You are not a human being attempting to contact a distant God for a physical cure. Your true identity is already complete, whole, and perfect because you are divine consciousness itself appearing as individual expression. To fully embrace this staggering truth and experience the miraculous transformations that await you, you must quietly and permanently abandon the centuries-old religious illusion regarding the kingdom of God. The sleeping world has been brutally trained by traditional conditioning to look up to the physical clouds, desperately waiting to enter a geographical heaven after the physical body dies, entirely missing the profound peace and perfect wholeness that exists in this exact moment. The kingdom of God is absolutely not a distant physical location, a mystical planet, or a future reward handed out by an external judge after a lifetime of exhausting human suffering. The kingdom of God is your present, awakened state of consciousness. When the Master gently taught that the kingdom of heaven is within you, he delivered the ultimate mystical secret. You are already standing flawlessly on holy ground, and you have never actually left the divine sanctuary. The infinite source is not separated from you by a single inch of physical space or a single fraction of a second in psychological time. The sacred meeting place between you and the divine is entirely within your own silent awareness. When you finally stop the frantic external search and quietly turn your attention inward to the silent I am, you effortlessly discover that everything you have been desperately begging for, infinite abundance for your failing business, indestructible health for your fragile body, and absolute peace for your troubled mind, is already perfectly established within your own spiritual identity. You do not need to journey across the world, perform empty physical rituals, or beg an outside universe for a miracle. You only need to gently close your eyes, quiet the chaotic noise of the human intellect, and silently remember the perfection that already exists. In this quiet, unshakable recognition of your inner kingdom, the terrifying illusions of the outer material world automatically and effortlessly adjust to reflect the breathtaking, eternal harmony of God that has always been perfectly present exactly where you are, breathing through you right now. To move into the reality of authentic spiritual living, you must undergo the most beautiful, liberating surrender a human soul can experience, the absolute releasing of personal sense. For decades, you have carried the agonizing weight of believing that you are a separate, isolated individual responsible for your own survival. Personal sense is the tragic illusion that you possess a private, a fragile life, a life you must desperately defend. A failing physical body you must frantically save, and a vulnerable mind you must protect from the chaotic world. It is the root cause of every fear, limitation, and suffering you have ever endured. But the radical discovery in Goldsmith's teaching gently invites you to lay this heavy burden down. There is absolutely no human being who actually needs healing, improvement, or spiritual development. When you softly release this personal sense of identity, you awaken to the unshakable peace of impersonal being. You realize with profound clarity that you do not actually have a life of your own to lose, heal, or save. The very life circulating through your form in this exact moment is the indestructible life of God. The intelligence guiding your steps is the infinite mind of the divine. You are not a frightened mortal fighting against the current. You are divine consciousness itself, appearing as individual expression. By releasing your personal sense of responsibility and your frantic desire to forcefully fix the world, you allow infinite intelligence to effortlessly flow through you. As you sink deeper into this surrendered state of impersonal being, you arrive at the core revelation of true spiritual healing. You must quietly and permanently understand that God absolutely does not fix human problems, because in the flawless realm of divine reality, no problem has ever existed. If the infinite Creator actually recognized your debilitating depression, your financial ruin, or your terminal physical diagnosis, those conditions would instantly become eternal spiritual laws, and they could absolutely never be healed. But God knows only pure, infinite perfection. Therefore, the divine does not reach down into the chaotic mud of the human illusion to repair a broken physical organ, to magically manipulate terrestrial currency, or to forcefully lift a heavy mental fog. God is simply present as absolute wholeness, infinite abundance, and indestructible peace. Disease and disorder exist solely in human mental concepts about the body and physical limitation. During the dark days of World War II, Goldsmith encountered a soldier dying of severe dysentery that military doctors could absolutely not cure. Instead of falling to his knees to desperately beg an external God for a miraculous physical healing, Goldsmith gently guided the soldier to recognize his true identity. They did not fight the disease. They spent 3 days in silent communion, recognizing that divine consciousness is utterly incapable of experiencing physical disorder. On the 3rd day, the disease completely and effortlessly vanished. The healing occurred not through medical intervention or human effort, but because their consciousness had been lifted entirely above the heavy mental concepts projecting the illusion of sickness. This is the miraculous power of true spiritual recognition. When you finally stop praying for God to fix your terrifying illusions, you experience the ultimate liberation of the ego. You completely drop the exhausting, desperate human habit of trying to aggressively demonstrate health or force a miraculous material outcome through positive thinking, visualization, or mental manipulation. Instead, you gently look directly through the terrifying physical appearance and quietly rest in the realization of present perfection. When a terrifying condition appears in your life, whether it is an incurable medical diagnosis or a severe financial crisis, you do absolutely nothing to battle it. You simply recognize its fundamental unreality in the gentle face of eternal truth. You understand that the sickness or the lack is nothing more than a hypnotic suggestion, a temporary shadow cast by the deeply conditioned carnal mind. As your consciousness becomes quietly illuminated with the absolute reality of God's omnipresent perfection, the false appearance automatically and naturally dissolves. Just as a terrifying mirage effortlessly vanishes the moment you recognize it as a mere trick of the light, you must completely and softly surrender every last remnant of your human effort. Stop trying to use spiritual principles to get material results. Stop fighting the terrifying shadows on the wall of your human experience. Gently release your desperate grip on the illusion. Breathe into the profound silence of this exact moment and allow yourself to simply be the quiet, open transparency through which the infinite perfection of God naturally reveals itself. You are completely safe, eternally held, and perfectly whole. When the heavy, terrifying storms of human existence inevitably arrive, when the frightening medical report of an incurable illness is suddenly delivered, when the dark financial crisis quietly strikes your failing business, or when the agonizing weight of a shattered relationship completely shadows your earthly world, the fragile carnal mind immediately and desperately demands a frantic human reaction. It urges you to panic, to forcefully fight the terrifying appearance, to stay awake through the long night, agonizing over the future, and to desperately manipulate the physical circumstances to somehow save yourself through sheer human effort. But you must gracefully, firmly, and completely refuse this exhausting invitation to engage in the terrifying illusion. This is the profound, mystical art of absolute non-reaction. True spiritual mastery is absolutely not the magical absence of human challenges, intense life transitions, or earthly difficulties. It is the breathtaking, silent refusal to grant those dense material challenges any spiritual reality, any divine presence, or any power whatsoever over your internal state of being. Instead of blindly and frantically reacting to the dark, suffocating shadows dancing on the wall of your human experience, you must gently and immediately step back into the sacred, untouched sanctuary of your inner silence. When the heavy, paralyzing waves of terror, anxiety, and earthly despair threaten to drown your fragile human intellect, you absolutely must not fight the fear, and you must not critically judge yourself for temporarily feeling it. Simply pause. Take a deep, quiet breath into the center of your being, and softly ask yourself a profound, identity-shifting question. What exactly is perceiving this fear right now? The physical body cannot feel fear. The terrestrial circumstances themselves cannot experience anxiety. The only thing terrified in this exact fraction of a second is the fragile, temporary human ego, the tragic personal sense of self that falsely believes it is isolated and separated from the infinite divine. But you are absolutely not that terrified. Vulnerable ego. You are the vast, eternal, and perfectly silent awareness that is gently observing the ego's panic. The exact moment you quietly shift your fundamental identification from the frightened human being to the infinite, observing consciousness. The terrifying, suffocating grip of the carnal mind is effortlessly and completely broken. You majestically become the unshakable, silent witness, gracefully watching the dark, chaotic storms of human experience pass entirely harmlessly through the vast, clear sky of your true spiritual nature, remaining completely and eternally untouched by the hypnotic illusion of any material threat or external disruption. When facing severe relationship conflict or toxic, difficult people, the ego violently screams for you to defend your personal position, to argue, or to forcefully change their troublesome behavior. But advanced practitioners learn to respond from spiritual understanding rather than reacting emotionally. You work entirely within your own consciousness, silently recognizing that the other person's true identity is divine consciousness, expressing absolute perfection. Their chaotic behavior exists only in mental concepts, absolutely not in their essential spiritual nature. Harmony miraculously emerges without confrontation or manipulation because consciousness simply recognizes itself. Similarly, during profound financial upheaval or career transitions, what appears as catastrophic external disruption is actually consciousness gently dissolving, limiting structures that no longer serve your spiritual evolution and authentic expression. You must welcome these transitions as consciousness expanding into greater freedom, rather than as problems to be desperately solved or agonizing difficulties to endure. You must completely stop struggling against others or forcing outcomes through personal will, allowing the infinite supply to express itself effortlessly. As you rest deeply in this profound state of non-reaction, a staggering transformation miraculously occurs. You finally realize that the frantic attempts of the terrified intellect have never solved a single fundamental spiritual problem. True divine solutions absolutely never arise from the chaotic noise of a panicking ego. To access the infinite power that operates as your being, you must practice spiritual listening. Instead of beginning each day with mental strategies and frantic planning, spend time in complete silence, allowing consciousness to reveal its own perfect activity. In this breathtaking silence, where you no longer try to forcefully fix or anxiously manipulate earthly appearances, infinite divine wisdom naturally arises. The perfect spiritual solution to your failing business or the harmonious resolution to your relationships will softly reveal itself not as a human idea born of fear, but as a quiet knowing welling up from the depths of your illuminated consciousness. You absolutely do not need to figure out the overwhelming complexities of your life. You only need to remain beautifully still and allow the infinite intelligence of the divine to flawlessly orchestrate your steps. As you journey deeper into this quiet truth, you must softly confront a deeply ingrained misunderstanding that causes profound disappointment in the spiritual lives of millions of sincere seekers. So many exhausted souls turn to spiritual teachings and the practice of recognition not to genuinely discover the divine, but as a secret, desperate tool to acquire earthly money, to forcefully fix a broken physical body, or to manipulate difficult human relationships. Joel Goldsmith identified this tragic trap as spiritual materialism. You unknowingly use spiritual techniques and intense visualization to get material results from a god you secretly imagine to be a cosmic vending machine. You believe that if you just gather enough spiritual currency, you will be rewarded with a comfortable material illusion. But this exhausting approach inevitably leads to devastating frustration, because you are still validating the terrifying reality of the dualistic illusion you desperately wish to escape. You are still blindly believing that you are a separate, vulnerable mortal who lacks something, and that external circumstances hold absolute power over your peace. When you begin to gently strip away this false sense of control, completely withdrawing your heavy reliance on human effort and the desperate desire for a specific earthly outcome, your human intellect will naturally and intensely resist the fragile carnal mind, which has spent decades frantically fighting to survive and manage your complex existence, is absolutely terrified of losing its central role as the grand problem solver of your life. It will violently rebel against the silence. It will generate countless logical arguments against spiritual truth, whispering anxious doubts and demanding that you immediately return to the familiar, agonizing habit of worrying, planning, and aggressively fighting the material appearances. It feels a profound, terrifying emptiness when it is no longer allowed to desperately manage your physical health or financial security. You must softly recognize this deep mental resistance, not as an enemy to be battled, but simply as the fading, chaotic echo of a conditioned mind that is finally being asked to rest. Do not fight this mental rebellion. And absolutely do not judge yourself for feeling the sudden vulnerability of completely surrendering your human control. Just breathe quietly into the center of the resistance, allowing the frantic waves of the carnal mind to gently dissolve into the vast, untouched ocean of your pure, observing awareness. In this sacred, vulnerable space of total surrender, you are gently invited to make the most beautiful, liberating shift a human consciousness can ever make. You must softly transition from seeking the fleeting gifts of God to seeking the silent presence of God entirely for its own sake. When you practice spiritual recognition specifically to heal an incurable illness, save a bankrupt business, or force a human relationship to align with your earthly expectations, you are still trapped in limitation. You must completely release the exhausting desire to use the divine merely to decorate your terrestrial dream with better health or a larger bank account. Instead, let your only practice be a quiet, yielding invitation to simply know the divine as your own intimate reality. Seek the quiet, eternal presence simply because it is the most beautiful, comforting, and perfect truth your soul could ever experience. When you sit in the profound silence, do not bring a heavy list of human demands, desperate petitions, or material expectations to the sacred altar of your consciousness. Come completely empty, beautifully naked of all earthly agendas, desiring absolutely nothing but the gentle experience of resting entirely in the infinite light. When you finally seek the internal kingdom solely for the immaculate peace of the kingdom itself, without a single secret motive or hidden human timeline, authentic spiritual living naturally begins. The infinite consciousness effortlessly expresses itself as perfect wholeness, unlimited supply, and harmonious existence, not because you forced it, but as the natural overflow of a soul resting entirely in absolute divine grace. To anchor this profound mystical truth into the very fabric of your daily human existence, you must gently cultivate the sacred art of practicing the presence in the midst of your ordinary, chaotic activities. You absolutely do not need to withdraw from the world, abandon your career, or live in isolation to touch the hem of the divine. Instead, I gently invite you to softly introduce a beautiful, effortless practice into the center of your busy, exhausting day, the profound 10-second pause, when the deafening momentum of the terrestrial world aggressively threatens to pull you back into the heavy, hypnotic illusion of human effort, personal responsibility, and overwhelming material conditions. Simply stop, right in the middle of a stressful earthly conversation, during an anxious daily commute, or while managing your failing business. Gently close your eyes or soften your gaze for just 10 fleeting seconds. In this tiny, sacred window of absolute grace, you absolutely must not try to forcefully fix a single human problem. You must not pray for a specific material outcome. And you must not critically judge the chaotic state of your own mind. You simply drop the heavy, suffocating burden of the mortal world and quietly breathe into the profound, untouched silence of your own pure awareness. This gentle, deliberate pause instantly pulls your fragile human consciousness out of the exhausting nightmare of psychological time. The carnal mind survives entirely by endlessly swinging between the agonizing regrets of a dead past and the terrifying fears of an imaginary future. But the infinite divine absolutely does not exist in the past, and it does not wait for you in the future. God only exists right here, in the flawless, breathing reality of the eternal present. When you softly anchor your attention in this exact fraction of a second, you effortlessly dissolve the heavy, dualistic illusions of the ego. You realize with a quiet, beautiful clarity that in this specific, untouched moment of now, there is absolutely nothing to fear, nothing to desperately manage, and absolutely nothing missing. The eternal present is the sacred, silent sanctuary where the infinite wholeness of God is permanently established, expressing as your very being, quietly waiting for you to simply stop running, stop fighting, and gently notice it. Do not let this remain a distant philosophical concept. You must gently translate this profound truth into a living, the breathing experience in this exact moment as you listen to these quiet words. Right now, as this message flows softly through your awareness, allow the dense, heavy concepts of your personal human history, your physical diagnoses, and your deep financial anxieties to simply dissolve into the quiet background of your mind. Softly release your tight grip on whatever terrifying earthly situation you were desperately trying to figure out moments ago. Notice the quiet, the gentle rhythm of your own breath, rising and falling without a single ounce of your conscious human effort or willful manipulation. The infinite, flawless intelligence that effortlessly beats your heart is the exact same divine presence gently looking out through your eyes right now. You are absolutely not merely a fragile mortal listening to a spiritual teaching. You are the vast, eternal consciousness softly waking up to its own indestructible reality. Feel the profound, soothing peace that naturally arises when you completely stop trying to become something better. Stop trying to heal a physical body and simply rest in the absolute, unchanging perfection of what you already are. There is absolutely no future moment where you will be more divine or more perfectly whole than you are right in this beautiful, quiet fraction of a second. The complete healing you have been desperately seeking, the infinite abundance you have been chasing, and the unshakable peace you have been begging for are all quietly resting right here in the center of your own unconditioned awareness. Let the noisy, anxious illusions of the mortal world softly fade away into nothingness, and simply allow yourself to be completely embraced by the gentle, infinite light of the present moment. You are eternally safe, completely untouched, and flawlessly whole in the silent arms of the eternal present. We have reached the beautiful, silent end of your exhausting human search. There are absolutely no more terrifying earthly problems left for your fragile intellect to desperately solve. No more broken physical conditions to frantically fix. And no more complex spiritual concepts to exhaustingly analyze. You must now completely and softly lay down every remaining weapon of your tired, carnal mind. I gently invite you to stop thinking entirely. Let the heavy, chaotic, and deafening noise of your anxious human thoughts effortlessly fade away, dissolving completely into the vast, untouched background of your pure awareness. Notice the quiet, a natural rhythm of your breath as it softly rises and falls, moving effortlessly without a single ounce of your personal human effort, willful manipulation, or desperate control. Allow yourself to sink deeply and fearlessly into this beautiful, comforting emptiness. This profound, silent void is absolutely not a terrifying absence of earthly life, but the breathtaking, infinite presence of the divine itself, gently holding you in absolute, unshakable perfection. You are no longer a frightened mortal, desperately fighting against the dark, hypnotic illusions of the material world. You are the vast, eternal consciousness, softly resting in its own majestic light. Every frantic human prayer has been quietly answered through the simple, breathtaking realization that the infinite source and your present awareness are perfectly, eternally one. There is absolutely nothing left for you to forcefully do, no external deity left to beg, and absolutely no human timeline left to anxiously meet. In this pure, untroubled stillness, you finally realize that the exhausting earthly journey of spiritual materialism was merely a heavy dream, and the sacred destination has always been the quiet sanctuary of your own heart. As you rest peacefully in this sacred space of the eternal present, do not rush aggressively back into the deafening, toxic noise of the sleeping mortal dream. Let the profound stillness wash over your entire being, gently dissolving the last remaining shadows of personal sense, earthly lack, and human fear. If this quiet, mystical truth has softly awakened the infinite remembrance within your soul, simply leave the two sacred words, "I am in the space below." This is absolutely not a loud, desperate human demand for earthly attention, nor is it a frantic, noisy, terrestrial action. It is a profound, silent confirmation of your indestructible spiritual identity gently echoing into the universe. It is the majestic, quiet acknowledgement that you have finally stopped your exhausting external search and have peacefully come home to your true, flawless nature. You have absolutely nothing left to aggressively achieve, nothing left to desperately demonstrate, and absolutely nothing left to fear in this dense physical world or any other. The infinite kingdom of heaven is already perfectly established exactly where you stand, breathing through you in this exact, holy fraction of a second. Rest now, completely and eternally untroubled by the fleeting, hypnotic shadows of the terrestrial world. For the infinite light is already shining perfectly within you. Be still and simply know